Preparing the stream. And I also want to put us onto Unibuzz. Good evening. It is Friday, October 15th. It's the third Friday of the month, and you're right on time for the show about film and television trivia. It's Matinee Minutia. And if you'll tell me in the chat room if you can hear us, we'll get things underway in just a moment here. Looks like we've got our friend Lady Janet in the room, as well as our friend Tommy. And Toppy, did you manage to get in?
I'm on my way.
Okay. And, oh, you know what? I have to say, there's a new little box that says, got it, once you've actually hit the go live thingy. Haven't done this in a few days.
Yeah, I think I got one too.
So, has everyone found their places at the dining table here? Got our script up, and we're in the chat room.
Okay, I can hear you in the. I can hear you on Discord. So.
Okay.
Or wherever. Yeah. So we're live.
Right.
We're streaming.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and get this underway here. Let's see. Oh, someone's having a good time.
Wow.
Please take your seat. Matinee Minutia is about to begin. Hello, and welcome to the Halloween edition of Matinee Minutia. Tonight, our auditorium will be graced with the presence of none other than the Mid-Atlantic mistress of cosplay, the Maven of Mayhem. Please put your hands together for Demanda Martini.
Woo! Yay! Spooky.
Young Shiloh is the Rapunzel of her reality, a teenager confined to her bedroom by an inherited blood disease. Outside her window, the world has become obsessed with survival through surgery and the drug addiction that follows. Now that she's 17, her curiosity has gotten the better of her. What will she find on the other side? Is there a cure for her illness? What kind of work keeps her father out late at night? Grab a gas mask and your bug-catching kit. It's time for Repo, the genetic opera.
Hit it, boys!
What do you get when you take a dash of the silver screen? A pinch of golden oldies? And a smidgen of streaming. It's time for Matinee Minutia with your hosts DJ and Toppy.
Well, Toppy, it's a full house tonight, and we have a guest.
We sure do.
You know, it's nice the leaves are changing, and we're getting a bit of crisp air. And, you know, I know the folks at home didn't get to see her arrival, but the wonderful Demanda Martini pulled up the driveway, kind of like Cinderella, but it was a pumpkin. Now, the thing is that after midnight, her pumpkin turns back into a Kia Soul. Oh, but we have a movie we're talking about tonight, so we're going to get right to it. This is an early 2000s horror. Now, it's also a musical, which we haven't done that many of, so let's rip.
By the middle of the 21st century, organ failure had become a worldwide epidemic. But GeneCo was there to satisfy the demand for organ replacements.
Enjoy GeneCo's day and nighttime formulas.
The problem is, if you miss a payment, GeneCo sends out the repo man. And when he finds you, your time is up.
Collect on the Handelman account at once. This payment is past due.
Everybody, oh yeah. Stand up. People, Woo! Everybody.
Look what I've become. It's me she must escape. I'm only living out a lie. I am the monster. I'm the villain. What perfection! What precision! Incisions I deliver, unscathed organs I deliver, need possession.
Ooh, little
Well,
spooky, little rock opera. There's a whole lot going on there.
I mean, a musical is a term used very loosely for this film. There's a lot of talk singing
Mhm.
in
Oh,
this
yeah.
show.
Yes, what do we call that? I think it's called vocalizing. It's kind of like what Bill Shatner did, which, I mean,
It's fine, and it's what's his name in My Fair Lady, like it's a thing, but again, it's a stretch to say this is a musical.
Not long ago, about a year ago, maybe a little bit more longer, we did one of our first musicals, and we talked about Moulin Rouge, which has such a great soundtrack. And this film is one that has such a big soundtrack. Now, we'll talk about the movie more later, but I used to crank this on my car stereo on my way out to the haystack for that obligatory required family visit. And it was just terrific because it's like a little bit of Skrillex, and it's gonna be over and done before you know it. So
well, we also did Phantom of the Paradise. Leave us not forget.
true. And then we finally got around to Phantom of the Opera, the inspiration.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So Toppy, what about the stage?
Well, let's set it. Why don't you and Amanda tell us what was going on in the wild of 2008 when this film premiered?
All right, the world in 2008. In China, Beijing was host to the US Olympics in 2008. In the year to come, nearly 3,500 children were named Ayun, which I guess is Mandarin for Olympics, and thousands more found namesakes in the Chinese Olympic mascots in the year to come.
Photos of an uncontacted Amazon tribe were published in major news outlets worldwide. The group was being threatened by encroaching loggers, ranchers, and oil prospectors. The Brazilian government released the images of the tribe to show the world firsthand the people who are threatened by deforestation.
That was some weird stuff. I got to tell you, I remember that clearly. And the idea that there was actually a culture of people that had never been contacted was mind-boggling. Just mind-boggling.
Yeah, I guess they weren't that friendly because some of the pictures had spears.
Well,
they were. And I think that they're still like, no, you don't come here. I mean, this was almost 15, almost 20 years ago, and they're like, no, we're good, thank you.
More to come on the subject here. The European Space Agency, ESA, published satellite images off the region that showed melting Arctic ice and a nearly obstacle-free waterway. And while it was bad news for environmentalists, the melting ice brought glad tidings for businessmen. And as the Panama and Suez canals become more heavily trafficked, the prospect of using the Northwest Passage has Canada, Denmark, Norway, Russia, and the United States clamoring for rights to the water right. They're wringing their hands at the expense of the world.
I mean, aren't they always?
Mm-hmm.
Australian Prime Minister Kevin Rudd delivered a formal apology nearly a century in the making. Between 1910 and 1970, nearly 100,000 Aboriginal children were taken from their parents as part of the campaign to phase out Australia's native race. These children became known as the Stolen Generation. The Australian government upheld the campaign because studies showed that Aborigines were at a higher risk for alcoholism, infant mortality, criminal behavior, and drug addiction than non-native Australians. I wonder why being displaced would make people so uneasy and upset.
I don't know. It's a curiosity.
Yeah. 2008 was a landmark year. I still lived in Denver, Colorado at the time. And I remember that one night coming home from work, the commuter train was packed to the gills. And why? Because it was the Democratic National Convention. U.S. Senator Barack Obama became the 44th president the following year and the first Black American elected to office. Now that brings us, Toppy, to our favorite part, and that is, well, people will be a little too young to be getting a star on the Walk of Fame in 2008. So who left the world in 2008 that some of us might remember?
Yeah, who croaked? Heath Ledger, sadly. Charlton Heston, pow, 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 pow. Get your damn dirty hands off me. Oh, Paul Newman. Oh, Bernie Mac. Suzanne Plachette. Oh, Roy Scheider. Oh, Estelle Getty. Oh, Majel Barrett. Oh, Eartha Kitt. George Carlin. Oh, and Harvey Korman. All passed away that year.
2008 was, I remember 2008. It was like, oh my, like it was like a whole generation of celebrities, because it was people that like my parents had sort of like grown up seeing in movies and stuff. And it was, and so my parents were like, oh my gosh, like all the, like everyone that we know is dying. It was, I remember it was very like, oh my gosh. And then of course, like for me, Heath Ledger was only, I think, 3 or 4 years older than I am. Mm-hmm. So again, he would only be a few years older than me now, and that was also a big shot. And like the whole controversy surrounding his death. And I remember like the Olsen twins were involved because like they were friends, and everyone was worried about Michelle Williams because they had just recently broken up, and she still had like their young child, and of course, like he'd had all that buzz surrounding The Dark Knight, which I know we're going to talk about in just a second. And then, of course, you know, he posthumously won the Oscar that year for that role, and it was like he was like so huge, and then it just everything just kind of imploded on him, and I just remember it being very, very sad, very sad.
Yeah, I mean, at least Charlton Heston, Paul Newman, Susan Plachette, Majel Barrett, Eartha Kitt, they were all, you know, towards the end of their lives.
Yeah.
But that was really a shocker. Did he pass before the movie got released, Dark Knight?
No, I believe the movie was released, and then he died while the movie was going. And I also remember he was in the middle of filming Dr. whatever Imaginarium, blah blah blah, whatever that whole movie was, and so then they had to change filming to have the other actors that came in and filmed the part, because then he was going into different dimensions, so he appeared differently in other scenes and whatever. That movie also was not that great, but I remember that.
I remember seeing the movie. My husband made it a point to track it down just because of that, with them changing the actor's role. Mm-hmm. But yeah, just a few others in here in that list there. Roy Scheider, that was unexpected. I think he had a battle with cancer. Now, Majel Barrett Roddenberry, I mean, she had leukemia in the last years of her life. She was actually only in her 70s. So, um, I've always wondered, it was just a sticking point for me because in the year later, Star Trek Nemesis was released, and that was the last film with the Next Generation cast. But she must have been in rough shape because she didn't even get to be in Deanna Troy's wedding. I mean, you cannot see Next Generation and Loaxana Troy and think for a moment that she would miss her daughter's wedding. I mean, she was talking about her wedding since the girl could read,
Yeah, what a shame. Wouldn't that be neat?
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just we talk about her a lot because when we met, I was dressed as Loaxana, and I know we've mentioned before, like she definitely was. She must have been in really bad shape for them. Either they reached out and they were just like, no, she can't, or they already knew that she would not have been able to be a part of the film.
Yeah, that's a shame because she belonged there in that scene, in that movie. So DJ, we got our movie coming out in 2008, but what was also out there in the theaters?
Alrighty, so Repo the Genetic Opera, the film that we're discussing tonight, a horror musical. Now, it was sort of an art house film, an independent film, so it had a limited release. But some of the films that were in the top of the box office that year included number one, bringing in $533 million. Now, that's about the price some folks in the San Francisco Bay Area pay for their house, believe it or not. The Dark Knight, and of course that had Christian Bale and Heath Ledger. Number two brought in $318 million. Now that would still pay off my house. Has Iron Man with Robert Downey Jr. and Gwyneth Paltrow. And then number three, some fans would like to deny this existed. Shia LaBeouf did a movie with Harrison Ford once. It brought in $317 million, and it was called Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. So, as I was saying, Repo is an independent art house film. And usually we talk about the films that did around the same. So we're going to talk about the middle of the box office. These are the hits that fell from the box office, At about 100, midway through the year in the returns, bringing in only 30 million. Maybe it paid the bills, not sure. There's an animated film, and it had the voices of Andy Samberg and Stanley Tucci. Some people have a thing for him. It was called Space Chimps.
I literally don't remember or recall that ever being a thing.
I almost thought it was like for a moment, I thought it was the guy that was in The Hot Chick. I forgot his name.
Rob Schneider.
Right? They must have went to school together. And then one last than Space Chimps actually also happened to be from the same studio as Repo, Lionsgate. Film called The Bank Job. Also brought in 30 million, and that had a couple people I haven't heard for, Jason Statham and Saffron Burrows. And
so Jason Statham then later became more of a box office draw when he joined like the Fast and Furious franchise and the replacements and all of those kind of movies. He, I think at the time, was still a little under the radar because I think he was in like Guy Ritchie's movies. Like I remember him being in not Lock, Stock, and Two Barrels. What's the one with Brad Pitt? I own it. It's over here somewhere.
Oh, not Burn After Reading.
Oh. So he was in that one. And so I think he was still a little under the radar, but he's since become sort of an action star. He definitely is in it's what I consider to be a lot of the same movie, but it just different. It's like just replace dead wife with dead child, and instead of a bank job, it's like a car thievery. He's in a lot of those type of movies now, but I mean, obviously he's sitting pretty on the box office. But Saffron Burrows, I remember because there is a delightfully campy horror slash action movie called Deep Blue Sea about genetically engineered sharks, which has one of the best shock deaths ever. I'm not going to ruin it for anyone, but there is definitely a big scare towards the middle of the film when the sharks start attacking. That movie stars Thomas Jane and Saffron Burrows and LL Cool J.
Oh,
It is definitely one of like my favorite terrible sort of like disaster action movies.
for a moment there, it sounded the way you were describing Jason Statham as he's a low budget Liam Neeson.
I mean, but at the same time, like it's like kind of, but it is definitely like that vein of action. Like he has definitely found his, you know, just like some actors like find like their niche in like rom-coms that are still very formulaic. Like he's definitely found his niche in like these formulaic action movies where again, he's definitely still working and paying off, you know, his student loans with. So, you know, I'm not gonna fault him for that.
And you'll have to forgive me, but I mean, I can be judgmental when it comes to names. I hope to goodness that that's actually like maybe her legal name, because a name like Saffron Burrows, it sounds like she's an adult film star. I'm sorry.
I believe because you know when you watch a movie, so like you bring up the Wikipedia and then you start playing the game of like reading, you know, all the stuff. I believe that is her legal name. She started out as a model, if I remember correctly. And also, if I remember correctly, she is a lesbian, which again, fantastic.
Oh, well, you know, speaking of mysteries in the dark there, I mean, if you've been living under a rock, the Mistress of the Dark recently came out of the dark. So,
Yes.
you know, that's good to know that people are living their truth.
Yes.
So, the Marionette Theater, the venue we're coming to you from this evening, is a place of many a splendid thing that's past. And we were once a place of vaudeville, and we also had some burlesque, but we've also had some magic acts. And the person that made this movie, we like to call the magician of the film, the director, Mr. Darren Lynn Bousman. Tommy, tell us about the director.
Okay, born in Kansas, and boy, did he get far away from Kansas. Repo was his fifth film, and after that, he directed 5 more films, and currently to date, he's got 24 directing credits. And this may not surprise anyone after watching this movie, Repo, but he's the member of the unofficial Splat Pack, a term for the modern wave of directors making brutally violent horror films. He is the first horror director to ever have his first 3 major Hollywood films open up at number 1. That would be Saw 2, Saw 3, Saw 4. Saw. Movies I despise, by the way. I hate torture porn. No, thank you. No, thank you. Yeah.
So I mean, since you brought it up, I'm going to elaborate. That's just not my whole thing. Like, I don't like the torture porn. I don't like gore porn. Like that's just not something that I enjoy watching. And learning this about him, I was like, oh, well, then this makes sense of what like Repo is. Like, oh, okay, that, because if that's like the genre that he likes and that he sort of like, you know, sort of revels in, that would make sense as to why this movie happened.
Yeah, I once tried to watch the first Saw movie and I said no thank you, turned off.
I believe I only saw 3 in the movie theater because it was Halloween. My friends and I, we lived in a neighborhood that was attached to a movie complex, and so we just like stumbled over drunk. We're like, yes, it's Halloween, we're gonna see Saw 3. It, first of all, it's terrible, and it definitely gave me nightmares for a long time. Like, it is definitely not something that I would ever choose to watch ever again.
So it also might not surprise you to know, after watching Repo, that Bousman loved rock operas and musicals, ranging from Jesus Christ Superstar to Tommy. So here's his big love, musicals and gore. And he really Well, he got in there and mixed them up, and that's how the movie came out. So he hired a Japanese rock star, Yoshiki, to produce the music for this movie. And the source of the material for the movie came from a musical that was produced in 2002 and performed, I think, on the West Coast and off Broadway, maybe even off Broadway. And it was a musical of the same name. And that musical for the stage was written and composed by Darren Smith and Terrence Zunnick. So that's where that's the guys we can thank for coming up with this whole storyline of the movie, which is pretty, wackadoodle. But that's, I can see why the director Darren Bousman was attracted to this material, and you can just see his mind working like, I can do this. I can make this into a movie. So that's exactly what he did about 6 years after the musical opened on stage.
Now, in my defense, like I said, I am not the world's biggest horror film fan, and I was introduced to this by a roommate at the time. But I was intrigued to see something that Sarah Brightman would dare to be in, because she hasn't been in that many things outside of theater, as well as Paris Hilton, because for those of you who haven't really seen anything she's been in, a couple of years before Repo, she was in a remake of House of Wax. Now, to borrow something from our sister podcast on Univa's Scream Queens, that is a name that's given to any woman who plays in horror movies who's known for a flair for the dramatic, a scream queen like Jamie Lee Curtis. So I enjoy seeing Paris Hilton being dragged off. And here we are with that kernel of truth. And
so I found out about this movie through some friends, and I had never seen it before. I watched it this week in preparation for this, but I always was very intrigued by it, not because of the story, but because you have like these three levels of like celebrity in the movie. So first you have Sarah Brightman, who is like, not that theater is quote better than television or film, but she's known as like an opera singer, like only does like very high drama theatrical roles. And I know we're gonna talk about her in a minute. And then you have like the mid-level of like Anthony Stewart Head and Alexa Vega, who are like known in certain circles, but they're not like household names enough. But it's like, yeah, I know who that is. I've seen Buffy. I saw Spy Kids. Like, I know who those people are. And then you have Paris Hilton, who, though honestly wasn't terrible in this movie. I mean, it was not good, but it wasn't terrible. Who was known primarily as, sort of like her reality star persona, as we know now, going back, like that whole Simple Life was obviously this whole persona that she put on to, get famous and all of that stuff. So it was just kind of like, I was like, what a weird mixed bag of nonsense. And then Paul Sorvino, who, is like this, I mean, he's, again, not like a household name where like if you say Paul Sorvino, people are immediately going to know who you're talking about. But you're like, yeah, he was on Law and Order. He was in, Romeo and Juliet. He was, this or that. All of this. It's like, oh yeah, I know who you're talking about. Just so, what a weird mixed bag of a cast.
Yeah, I'd love to know how they convinced Paul Cervino to do this. But I can see him saying, this is going to be challenging for me. Because even though he does sort of vocalize at the beginning, about, I don't know, 3/4 of the way through the movie, all of a sudden he does start singing.
And the thing is, he is sort of like like an opera singer. Like that's definitely like his style of voice. And so like it's weird that they didn't lean into. Now, granted, again, this role obviously wasn't written for him, but it's just kind of weird that they didn't lean more into that, because they definitely leaned into Sarah Brightman. Like that was they were definitely like, oh my God, Sarah Brightman's going to do this. Yes, please do all of your operatic nonsense. Absolutely, that's what we want. So it was kind of weird that they didn't have him do that, and it sort of, again, for me, knowing what he can do, because I've seen him do other things, I was like, well, this was kind of a waste. This was not using your actor to the fullest potential. But also, again, well, I'm gonna save some of those opinions for later when we're just allowed to free talk about this film, because I have a lot of opinions.
So, in a moment here, we're going to go to our intermission where we'll regale you with some behind the scenes. But, just to touch on Mr. Paul Sorvino, I'm the nitwit that loves just the odd little factoids. So, of the many things that Paul Sorvino has been in, the one thing that I can recognize him from is he once played Worf's brother in an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Oh my God, that's right. Everything we do is somehow connected to Star Trek. Have you noticed that?
A little bit.
I mean, I'm not shocked.
So we're gonna trot on over here to the snack bar where our senior showgirl's mysteriously missing tonight. Perhaps she's at her group therapy meeting. But in the meantime, pour yourself a drink. And here's an interview from a 2007 Comic-Con appearance by the director and the person in charge of music for Repo.
Hey everybody, Alex Zalbin here, and I am with Joe Bisharo and Darren Smith, who are working on the new movie Repo, the Genetic Opera. Thanks so much for chatting with me, guys.
You're welcome.
Thanks. So let's talk about the movie a little bit. You guys are bringing it to Comic-Con. I think it had a very interesting genesis, a very interesting way that it became a movie. I mean, it was started off as an off-Broadway show, right?
Well, yeah, and even before that, I'm the co-writer and composer of this. We started out with doing 10-minute operas, playing clubs and coffee houses throughout LA. We had one of our 10-minute operas was called The Necromerchant's Debt, and from that, we decided, let's do this as a full-scale show. So we were doing 99-seat theaters and throughout LA, and then we went to off-Broadway to the Wings Theater.
Let's actually take a little step back and talk about what Repo, the Genetic Opera is before we go any further.
Okay, well, Repo, the Genetic Opera is basically takes place in the not so distant future where people can buy anything on credit, including organs and genetic enhancements. And if you don't pay, there's, you're going default, a Repo man is going to come and take your heart away and kill you in the process, repossess your organs and give it to somebody else. So Repo, the Genetic Opera is basically, it's a story of one repo man, genetic repo man, and his teenage daughter. And it's an opera. It's an opera, meaning in the truest sense, it's sung from beginning to end.
Why an opera?
Well, Terrence Adunich is my partner in crime in writing this. First of all, I have a background in degree in music and wanted to combine my love of German opera with Nine Inch Nails, and I found just the right guy to do it with me. And we both like the idea of once you get into the artifice of people singing, allowing people just almost forget that people are singing, as opposed to a lot of musical theater where it's great and people say, hey, this is such a beautiful morning. Oh, wait, I hear a song coming up, and then they sing exactly the same thing. We like musical theater, but that's not really our thing. We wanted opera, and specifically some sort of 21st century rock opera.
Now, how did it move from stage to film? I mean, obviously there are challenges inherent in bringing anything from stage to film because they're very different media, but this even more so, I think, because you have a mashup horror opera stage show that's also sort of movie, various genres at the same time. What are the challenges inherent there?
Well, some of the challenges were, finding the right people and the right cast. And then I guess one of the opportunities was finding somebody like Joe to come in and produce the music, because beforehand it was basically me playing about 13 instruments and being a one-man band, and gradually added people from various, and I think Joe will be able to talk about it, the great musicians we had on board. So, but from a musical standpoint, it was easy and it was great. From the other standpoints, it's been a great experience, but of course, we're a relatively low-budget film by Hollywood standards. So we've had to really like pick and choose our battles, and in fact, we're building this bizarre type of future in with an $8.5 million budget. So that was a challenge. But I'd have to say though, we've seen it grow because we've been able to do this over the years with various actors, seeing how audiences react to it. But having said all that, we've had great people in the past. This is the best cast we've ever had, and I'm very proud of this film.
Okay, so as we continue on the discussion here, we just talked about the director, the magician of the film. Now we're going to talk about the folks in the spotlight that brought their star power and brought the characters to life. So first up, we have Mr. Paul Cervino, the gentleman I just mentioned, once played Worf's brother on Star Trek. He played Roddy Largo, Rotissimo Largo. He's a large and in charge man who may be part of an organized family. And he was Brooklyn born, and Cervino began acting in the 70s. Now, he'd appeared in at least 24 films prior to Repo, so he was no stranger to keeping the lights on. His first supporting role was in a film called Where's Papa? And it was a Carl Reiner film starring George Segal and Ruth Gordon. Now, he might have only been in it for a moment, but now I want to see it. Because who doesn't want to see Ruth Gordon in a Carl Reiner film? And in 2008, Paul Cervino appeared in 3 films. So he kept busy. And over the next 5 years, Cervino would appear in 8 more films. Now, more recently, as of 2019, he had a series of appearances in the Epix Channel show, Godfather of Harlem. And this is a prequel to American Gangster. And it said that was a Denzel Washington film. The series on Epix starred Forrest Whitaker in the lead role. Now, in 2021, Paul Cervino starred in a film called The Birthday Cake. This is a movie with Ewan McGregor and Val Kilmer. So check that out.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just briefly, he makes a great villain. And in this movie, he's good as the villain. I mean, he stands out as the villain. So it was a great choice. Definitely
his acting style and the way that he carries himself is very. So the first thing I remember seeing him in was Romeo and Juliet, where he played Lord Capulet, and was very, very similar to this, like, the patriarch of an organized family, where he's kind of disappointed in his children and family. But I think what really made him famous was him being in Law and Order for so many years.
Mm-hmm. You know what? I'm surprised. Scorsese and all of his gangsta movies. I'm surprised he never tapped Paul Cervino for any of his movies that I know of.
Paul Cervino auditioned for every single one, and was probably just like in the last line of callbacks and just passed over for like one person.
Yeah,
I guarantee that's kind of what happened there.
Yeah. So, man, tell us about Anthony Stewart Head.
So, Anthony Stewart Head played Nathan Wallace, Shiloh's father and widower, who wrongly believes he is inadvertently responsible for the death of his ex-wife, Marnie. He is also the Repo Man. He's UK born, began acting on TV in the late 70s. In the 90s, he began working in American television. In 95, he was in VR5 on Fox. I don't remember that show. I'm going to have to look
We
into
did an
that.
episode about that, and yeah, all
Believe
sorts
it or not, we did VR.
But then what made Anthony Stewart Head famous is in 1997, he started on Buffy the Vampire Slayer playing Giles, Buffy's watcher.
Yes.
Although he has primarily worked in TV, Repo was his 10th film. He would star in another 7 films over the next 5 years, including The Iron Lady in 2011 with Meryl Streep about Margaret Thatcher. And more recently, he had a series of appearances on Apple TV's Ted Lasso about an American football coach hired to save a London team. Anthony Stewart Head also famously is one of the inspirations for the very famous musical episode during Buffy the Vampire Slayer. They were, I believe the cast and crew had gone to karaoke, and Joss Whedon heard Anthony Stewart Head sing and was like, wait just a minute. You didn't tell me you could do this. And then decided that, so it was him and, Amber, what's her name? She's the one who played Tara, Willow's girlfriend. Like Joss Whedon finding out that the two of them were actually really strong singers, really kind of got him to decide that they were going to do this musical episode on Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Cool bit of trivia.
And if you haven't catched Anthony Stewart in Buffy and you want to see him in something fun, he had a series of appearances on a British show called Little Britain. Kind of hard to find.
Right. He was on Little Britain for a while.
He played a prime minister who was always turning down the advances of his male assistant.
All right, let's talk about Alexa Pina Vega. Did I pronounce it right?
I think so.
Pina Vega. Amanda, let me just run this by you.
Yes.
If I was a drag queen and I called myself Alexa Penis Vagina, would people understand the reference?
I mean, probably not, but I would definitely
laugh. I want to say Pina Vega on the rocks.
All right. So Alexa Pina Vega, she was Shiloh Wallace, and she's the primary protagonist of the movie we're talking about. She was born in Florida. She began acting in the mid-90s. There was a show, with Burt Reynolds. Believe it or not, it was called Evening Shade. It was a sitcom.
I used to watch that show all the time.
Yeah. And you know what? It was good, don't you think?
I remember watching it. Yeah.
And by the way, she was only 5 when she was on Evening Shade. So Repo was her 9th film. And prior to that, she'd appeared in 3 movies. You might know Spy Kids with Antonio Banderas. She would star in 10 films after Repo, including a short-lived supporting role in the ABC Family. I guess this is a series, possibly, Ruby and the Rockets with David Cassidy. Does anybody know about this?
I've never heard of this.
Me neither.
But I also stopped watching like a lot of like television, like regular television in like 2016. So
yeah. Also, maybe you know her as the voice for a character in the Casa Grandes Nickelodeon series about a Hispanic family that moves into the big city. You might know her from that. So that's Alexa Pina Vega. DJ, how about Sarah Brightman?
Oh, goodness. One of my reasons for watching this film, Sarah Brightman, when I was in high school, we went on a field trip for school. And, out in the haystack, we didn't get out that often. But I got to go to Toronto and I saw Phantom of the Opera when it was hot. Now, Sarah Brightman wasn't in the Canadian production, but Sarah Brightman was in Repo and she played the opera diva, Blind Mag. And she is the godmother of the female lead in this film of Shiloh. Now, Sarah Brightman was born in the UK. She began her career as a member of a dance troupe, believe it or not. It was called Hot Gossip. And
Hot gossip.
What a freaking amazing name for a dance troupe. That's
right?
incredible.
She released several disco singles as a solo performer in those days. And she is primarily a performer. Brightman has only appeared in 3 feature films prior to Repo, and one of which was called Aspects of Love in 2005 with everybody's favorite older gentleman, Albert Finney. And in 1981, she made her West End musical theater debut in Cats. That's when she met her future ex-husband, Andrew Lloyd Webber. And she went on to star in several West End and Broadway musicals, including, of course, Phantom of the Opera, where she originated the role of Christine Daae. Now, her original London cast album of Phantom, which I remember my sister had a copy of, and I fell asleep too many nights in her first apartment, was released in CD format in 1987 and sold 40 million copies worldwide, making it the biggest selling cast album, because there is a difference between a soundtrack and a cast album. And if you don't know the difference, please see the balancer to turn in your gate card.
Oh dear.
Brightman has also released 12 studio albums. Now, the lady of the hour, Miss Jamanda, please tell us about the heiress who brought her star power to the film, Miss Paris Hilton.
I mean, just so like obviously, I'm like Paris Hilton. Honestly, was perfect for the role of Amber Sweet, Roddy's daughter and the youngest of the Largo children. Like, obviously, she was perfect because of who the character was, and definitely for Paris Hilton, who's trying to like move closer and closer into acting more instead of being the American media personality and socialite that she had been known for. It was a smart career move for her, and honestly, like kind of worked. But she is the great-granddaughter of Conrad Hilton, the founder of Hilton Hotels, born in New York City, raised in Beverly Hills. She first attracted tabloid attention in the late 90s and became a fixture of New York City's late-night scene. She ventured into modeling, signing with Donald Trump's agency. Who knows what sort of horrors that poor child saw?
Oh my God!
I mean, she probably has had a settlement by now.
Oh, I'm sure she has, and I'm sure there's an NDA that she couldn't talk about in her more recent documentaries that she has had. After David LaChapelle's photographed her and her sister Nikki for the September 2000 issue of Vanity Fair, she was then the New York It Girl, which, you know, as we know, the It Girl happens every so often. In 2001. In 2003, her sex tape with then boyfriend Rick Solomon was released as One Night in Paris, which catapulted her into global fame, starting a trend of these celebrities for a long time, which led to her reality television series, The Simple Life, which she starred with her socialite friend, Nicole Richie. It started its 5-year run, reaching 13 million views on Fox. Paris Hilton is credited with influencing the revival of famous people for being famous throughout the 2000s, which, listen, when we learn our history of like the quote It Girl, I think the first one was in like 1930 is like kind of when that was coined, and those people were literally famous just for being famous. They were just these socialites who went to parties, and that's what they were famous for. So she was famous throughout the 2000s and one of the most ubiquitous public figures. She appeared in 2007 Guinness Book of World Records as the most overrated celebrity, while Forbes included her in its Celebrity 100 in 2004, 5, 6, and ranked her as one of the most overexposed celebrities in 2012. Critics indeed suggested that she exemplifies the celebutante, a celebrity not through talent or work, but through inherited wealth and lavish lifestyle. Hilton has parlayed her media fame into a brand which includes 19 product lines, 50 boutiques worldwide, and an urban condominium development in Manila, the Philippines.
Good Lord.
The line alone has brought in over $2.5 billion in revenue to date. Variety named her a $1 billion entrepreneur in 2011. So here's the thing.
Yeah.
In watching like the more recent documentary of her where she really kind of talks about her childhood trauma that she experienced, and like it's almost like, yeah, poor little rich girl, like I'm sorry. But at the same time, the fact that she took this dumb blonde brand that she was just sort of slapped with and then was like, oh, by the way, I'm still going to make billions at this, is kind of good for her. Like, I can't be angry at her for turning something that was not necessarily her fault. Like, the thing is, she was obviously this overly privileged girl who could just kind of do whatever she wanted. And then as she grew up in that, was like, oh, wait, I can actually turn this into money instead of, instead of like doing something else. Like, the stuff that I'm already doing, I can then make money on. And again, it's sort of finding like, oh yeah, it's just like anyone else being like, oh, I'm really good at communicating with children, I should become a teacher. It's sort of finding like your niche and your things and like, the stuff that you're good at. So again, good for her. I'm definitely pro woman, and girl, she did the damn thing. I mean, for someone who had a leaked sex tape, which has got to be one of the worst and most embarrassing things that can ever happen to you, and she's like, and I'm gonna sit on my empire of billions of dollars because, yeah. So I mean, good for her. But for the movie, like her whole like celebutante like image that she had cultivated up until 2008 was definitely smart of her to then, as she was trying to like break into movies and stuff, like this was definitely a good move for her. She was probably one of the better aspects of this movie, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, well said. I'm behind what you said. Can we say that Paris Hilton, in her day of gaining fame, before Snapchat, before TikTok, before YouTube, wasn't she an influencer of the early internet?
Oh yeah, so like yeah, because MySpace was kind of barely a thing when she was first starting. So like, I mean, and just like with any celebrity, like with endorsements, like she was definitely like, oh yeah, I remember she had like the first phone that flipped. What was that called? Do you guys remember?
Oh God,
Sidekick. I remember she was one of the first people who had a sidekick, and you would see her in paparazzi photos holding one. And I remember everybody wanted a damn sidekick. Like that was like it. And so yeah, like she was definitely the Instagram influencer before there was Instagram, or what we now call it. So like now we call them influencers. Back then we just called them celebutantes, or like, like the famous people we saw in the paparazzi. Yeah. So like now, like there's still paparazzi and it's still a problem, but like now people can put their own pictures out and take their own stuff. Like the other day, well, not the other day, like this past year, Jonathan Bennett, who became famous as Aaron Samuels in Mean Girls, his entire engagement, which seemed a little sus to me, but his entire engagement was sponsored by like Kay Jewelers. Like his ring was made for them.
Kay Jewelers.
Yes. It's like all of their engagement photos are like paid promotion, Kay Jewelers. And I'm like, I want my stuff to be sponsored. But it's like, so instead of like people catching you off guard and you just happen to be wearing something because you like it, it's like, no, these brands will reach out to you, and then you plan these things and then post it to Instagram. So she was doing that before it became a thing, and she was definitely already controlling that image before then people created like these social media presence. So I mean, is she a dumb blonde or is she a trendsetter? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Chat amongst yourselves.
Okay. So I'm about to go full force on this movie. So this movie, to me, in the very first few minutes, it was trying to take comic book influences, specifically like Sin City, Dark Knight Returns, very Frank Miller vibes. The sort of like dark rock opera of like Phantom of the Opera, Tommy, kind of a thing where it's like all spoke sung from start to finish. And then like the aesthetic from of like these gore horror movies, which were obviously starting to gain popularity at this time, and then mix it all up under the lens of frickin' Hot Topic, because you cannot tell me mesh tops and leather boots and long leather jackets is not at all marketed towards the Hot Topic crowd. And as someone who shopped at Hot Topic during the time, I can tell you that Repo the Genetic Opera merch was all over there. And it, for me, it was too many things that they were trying to do, and it didn't work for me. So like the special effects were trying so hard, and like the cinematography and like even like the way that the movie was sort of colored, it was like anytime they were outside, there was definitely like this weird blue white tone to everything, because obviously like outside, like it isn't real anymore, like the sun's never out or whatever. And they were trying so hard to do what movies like Sin City and The Spirit and like those like green screen movies were trying to do, but didn't have the budget to do it. And so it just looks not great. The plot and like the singing, because like, for example, Phantom of the Opera, the whole thing is sung. And I will admit, when I saw Phantom of the Opera in DC, there's the role of like the lady who's like in charge. I can't remember what her name is, but she's the one who like found the Phantom when he was a baby and like brought him to the opera house. And she's like the mother of Christine's best friend. I can never remember what her name is. In the movie, she's played by Natasha Richardson. So like that character, when I saw it, I couldn't understand anything that she's saying. Like she was definitely singing like this crazy high soprano. And so like I didn't understand like all the stuff. So like the Phantom's whole origin story, I didn't get. But in this movie, even with people not singing like that and talk singing, I still had no idea what was going on. I still have no idea what Zydrate is, how it works, why you stick a needle up someone's nose and pull it out of their nose. Why is it blue? Why is it glowing? I still don't know any of that. I don't understand why, because of organ failure, everybody got poor. Like everybody's poor all of a sudden. Like I didn't understand why everybody's poor and needs to pay this one company that controls all of the organ transplants. And I guess they genetically make these organs. Like I don't understand how this company sort of like got its stranglehold on the world. Like that part doesn't make sense. So like even with people talking, like it didn't make sense. And then one of the things that actually truly bothered me when they would do like the comic book flashbacks and then literally tell the same story again, but in flashback form as they were singing. I'm like, that means that I don't need this comic book explaining this to me, because you literally just explained it 2 minutes later. Like you, like were they trying to like add stuff to the movie? Obviously, the guy, because those comics were actually drawn by. So he played the Gravedigger, and he was one of the writers of the musical. Terrence Zunich.
Mm-hmm.
So those were all drawn by him. I'm like, sir, like your ego is showing. Like this was not a thing. The whole Gravedigger role, I know they were trying to do like a whole Shay from Evita as like the narrator who's like a part of the action, but is also outside of the action. Did not work for me. Like he was much too involved to be an outside looking in kind of a narrator. And again, even his narrations doesn't make sense. The songs, in my opinion, as someone who is a musical theater person, also weren't really well written. Like they weren't particularly well written. Again, they didn't really, because like the whole reason for musicals and people singing is to amplify the drama and the emotion. That's not going to work unless it's also moving along the plot. I did not understand, and I also don't understand why Roddy is trying to get Shiloh to be his heir. That whole plot point made zero sense to me. Like, I'm like, yeah, you don't like your kids, And so you're gonna go to like your enemy's kid who doesn't know who you are. Like it was like this whole like temptation thing to be like, oh, come to the dark side. Like, you know, you're like my enemy's kid. Like, you know, you should join me. And it just didn't make sense why he would need to do that.
Well,
but my absolute sorry, I'm gonna stop in 1 second. Sure. My absolute least favorite part of this entire film, absolute least part, the two brothers were so terrible. Terribly acted. Their songs made no sense. They have very little reason to sort of be there aside from just the / gore. Look how fucking weird we can be. Oh, I'm sorry, I cursed. Like they were so bad. So bad. I had to pause the movie several times to be like, okay, am I gonna make it through? Like am I gonna be able to suck it up and make it through this movie? It was so bad. And like, it just, I did not care for this movie at all. I have a few friends who do like this movie. They are a generation younger than me. And like the whole like gore, I don't need it to make sense. They're also the kids who like Spring Awakening, which I also find to be unbelievably terrible. Like it just was not, it was not my cup of tea. And again, like, I don't understand why it's like, yeah, I need to take your spleen back or whatever. But it's just like, I was like, honestly, I don't know. The whole premise was stupid to me. Like the whole thing just did not make sense. I did not care for this at all. I think I'm done.
So just to reflect, I think that this was a mashup of many different elements. I think that in hindsight now, looking back on it, in addition to being a horror film with a musical element, sort of a rock opera, in some regard, this is also a mockumentary if you think about it, because if you know of anyone or have a loved one who's struggled with health issues, you know, there is a culture of folks who feel that corporate America, and certainly what they call big pharma, you know, the companies that make our medicines, are out to get you because they don't care about the well-being of people. They just want to make money, and they don't give people a cure for anything like HIV or AIDS because they can make a bigger profit by treating it. So here we have Repo and this reality where, you know, people are maybe living longer, but they also make terrible choices, which is part of the story. You know, you have in one moment there's a scene at the opera where it's sort of a church-like environment where people are what they call it, proselytizing. They're talking about how wonderful GeneCo is because it saved their life. And there's a house mother who just singing about how she needed a kidney transplant, and GeneCo is there because she could get her new kidneys. And they also threw in a facelift just for a little bit more. So it gives you an idea of how, you know, something like that could be addictive. But, you know, mockumentary, rock opera, and my last thing, maybe I'll say, is, you know, again, this is not my absolute favorite movie. It's a guilty pleasure. Maybe, you know, it's one of those things like black licorice that's an acquired taste. But I think that the relationship between the lead, Roddy, and Shiloh is a little bit like, and I'm sorry, it's a little bit of a spoiler, but it's Harry Potter. So if you haven't caught it, it's been like a decade, so catch up. You know, it's a little bit like Professor Snape and Harry. He was in love with his mother. So, ergo, Roddy decides that his children aren't worth it. And the only reminder of the only person he ever loved, possibly, is his enemy's daughter. Now, he made his own enemy because, as he sang in the film, Nathan never expected the man who wrote his checks. So that gives you a little backstory that in the beginning, maybe Nathan and Roddy were in cahoots. And then the tide turned when his wife died. And suddenly, Roddy has got this miracle drug, the Zydrate. And that's when the mighty Genco empire builds up like a roller coaster. So we only have a few more moments here, Choppy. Do you want to reflect on some of the
Yeah,
moments of the film?
yeah. Give me a few minutes here before we have to get going. Uh, Obviously, the movie has some problems. Chief among them was the comic book motif that came up at the beginning heavily, but then just sort of faded away and disappeared. Like, why did you do that? The problem they had is that they had to set up a world, and they needed, if you wanted to understand any of what was going to happen, you had to understand the world these people were living in. So they had a whole lot of exposition to get through. And I guess they decided, well, let's do it like, let's cover this in a comic book way. They did, but the problem is you can't get two different things, opera and comic books. I mean, that's just, I, in operas, isn't there a libretto, or I don't know if they
I mean,
had.
I was just going to say, in the actual musical, not to interrupt you, Toppy, I'm sorry, but like in a musical, like there's still, like you should still have like the opening song should still set all of that up. So like, did they cut the opening song in order to like do this comic book motif, or is there not an opening song and you're just left to like figure it out later?
Well, it was a little clumsy. That's all. They just had too much story, and they couldn't figure a way out to stick it in because the music and the songs didn't cover it. So uh, um, it was difficult for me to watch. I at many times didn't understand exactly what was going on. I will say this to end with two things I want to say is I'll bet you anything I would have liked this on stage. I bet you this was a better production on stage than what we saw in the movie. I bet you anything. Also, I just getting back to Paris Hilton, I just want to say she was so invested in this movie that she gave some of her billions, okay, not billions, but she gave, okay, so this was a low budget Lionsgate thing. And basically, the only people financing any of this were the people that were making this. But one of the fun facts is that Paris Hilton got behind it and she said, I'll give you money to finish this movie. No problem. Here you go. So that settled a lot of their financial problems. She just said, I love this. Here's your money. And that's kind of how they got it done. But I really would. As much as I had problems with this movie, I would love to see this on stage.
And the saving grace of this discussion is this isn't the worst thing that I've made Toppy watch. Oh, so Toppy, we are running towards the end of our show here, so we're going to make our way out to the lobby, and we're going to talk about some other things you might enjoy if you liked Repo. So I will go first. From the year before Repo, there was a modern adaptation starring Johnny Depp of the classic tale of Sweeney Todd. Now, I've not seen this, but I am a Johnny Depp fan, so it is on my list of things to watch. Now, I also recently found a really terrific site that some of you should check out, and it recommends things that are similar if you enjoy it. So It's called bestsimilar.com. And bestsimilar.com says if you like Repo, a film from 2018 might be right up your alley called Bio Dead. This is a film that is about after a devastating biological disaster kills 12 million people, a hazmat team searches the contaminated wasteland for survivors, but find a vicious predator with a hunger for human flesh. So, probably on a Sci-Fi Channel in the middle of the night, but, Bio Dead from 2018. What say you, Toppy? What do you think folks might enjoy?
Well, I mean, the closest thing I came to are two movies we just happened to have covered in our years here at Matinee Minutia. That's Phantom of the Opera in 2004 and, well, Phantom of the Paradise in 1974. Phantom of the Paradise had a real weird sensibility. Even Barbarella, the very first thing we did on Matinee Minutia, that weird sensibility in the future world they were building, and Phantom of the Paradise seems to come closest to anything I've seen that's like this movie. So I would say if you liked Repo here, you would probably really like Phantom of the Paradise from 1974. Yeah. No, my goodness.
Oh, someone agrees with you.
By the way, I just want to ask, Demand, is there anything like this, or maybe better, or that you would recommend?
I would suggest, if you're into sort of like campy musicals that have like some violence. So number one, there's the Rocky Horror Show, which also Rocky Horror Picture Show, which I understand that Repo has turned into a movie that you go watch in the cinema with a shadow cast, which, okay, sure. If that's what people enjoy seeing, I'm not gonna yuck your yum, go for it. But so Rocky Horror, which is, the original camp, ridiculous horror slash musical, but another musical, which I would actually love it if they filmed, but it is awesome to see live. And by awesome, it is a terrible show. Like, it is definitely written to be campy and terrible. I've been in it before, but Evil Dead the musical, based on the first two films, Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2. So Act 1 is Evil Dead, and Act 2 is Evil Dead 2. And it is, so I got to play the like farmer or whatever that's in the second movie, sort of like redneck bumpkin or whatever. And it is fun, and there is like the splash zone in the audience. So like part of the fun of being an actor is when you get stabbed or when you die is to like make sure you squeeze your blood pouch to like get everybody in the face in the audience. And at our last performance, we had like two buckets, we did gallon milk jugs full of blood that, we can't do anything with because it was the last performance. So there's a scene at the very end of Act 2 where you kind of like sweep up the blood really quick to then like do like the thing at S-Mart at the end of the thing. And during that blood cleanup, we literally we just walked out to the audience and just dumped the rest of the blood on the people in the first 3 rows. We did like 3 rows that were like the splash zone, and like people who like go see the show, like it was really popular in Vegas for a while. So when people go see the show, they'll wear like a clean white t-shirt and just sit in the front row and just like they're just like ready to just get blood all over them and like get like the actors to sign in and stuff. Like that to me is more fun, and I think the plot is a little simpler to understand kind of thing. Because also like Rocky Horror, the plot, it doesn't make sense. Like I'm not like that plot makes 0 sense. Like Evil Dead, even if you haven't seen the movies, like demons come, cool, we've got to kill them, awesome. Like there's not a whole lot to like need to understand. There's also really funny songs. Like in the first act, there's a song with the 2 guys, because there's like the college students that are all there, and so between like the 2 guys, one of whom is Ash, when the demons first arrive, that it's a tango and it's called What the Fuck Was That? Because they start hearing the noises. And so it's just like, what was that? And it's a whole tango between the two, and it's hilarious. So if you like this, I think that you might enjoy that, especially if you want to lean more into like the comedy and musical theater aspect of these horror genres.
All right. Hey, I thought of a couple things while you were talking. One is, oh my God, I would love to have a conversation with you about your stage experiences on that or any others, because I bet you that's not the only one. But of course, we can't do it here. But I bet, oh my God, I bet you've got some good stories. Anyways, while you were talking, I also just remembered that, hey, another great kind of Rocky Horror kind of song and dance stage weirdo thing, Little Shop of Horrors.
Of course.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, people, I'd recommend that. I was lucky enough to see that in Buffalo, local production, and loved it. Loved it on stage way more than the movie. Folks, when these things, you got to see the stage version. You just got
We're actually going to be doing a stage version here at my local theater in the spring.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. All right. Well, we got to close down, DJ.
Yeah, we're out here in the lobby. Now, of course, we said that the Marionette Theater has been a venue of many things past, including a magic act. And the magician left a bag of coins. Would you hand me that bag, sir?
Here you go. Oh, it's heavy.
All right, let's find out what's coming next. All right, Toppy. I think that's all there on your side.
I'll open the capsule. Next time, folks, we're going to go from the weird and fanciful and gore to an intense examination of a family being torn apart by tension and tragedy. We're going to do Ordinary People from 1980. It starred Donald Sutherland, Mary Tyler Moore, believe it or not, Judd Hirsch from Taxi, Timothy Hutton, who I think won the Academy Award for this movie. I think, didn't he? Anyways, it was directed by actor turned first-time director Robert Redford. Next time, folks, Ordinary People from 1980.
All righty. Well, we want to thank our lady of the hour, Miss Amanda Martini, and this is her 5th appearance here, so look back.
5 times here.
Is it really?
Amanda.
No, I mean, that time I made your drink wrong, I didn't think you'd come back. Now, I do have to ask, because at Halloween last year, we did Hocus Pocus, and there was a little snafu with the dressing room. Did you get the supplies for your dressing room this year?
Yes, I did. Everything was perfect. Thank you so much.
Oh, good. And had you had those before?
Yes, they were. So I've had them before. These sour Skittles were very delicious. The ones that I had before, they had like the outside. The ones I had before had like that outside sour coating, kind of like a Sour Patch Kid. These ones don't, so they're a little different. But they're good. I love sour candy. I love candy in general. I love fruit candy. My favorites are Skittles and Starbursts. But yes, they were very delicious. So thank you all so much for putting those in my dressing room today.
You're quite welcome. Well, let us know, or the listeners at home know, where they can find you in the wide world here if they want.
So you can find me across social media on all platforms at Demanda Martini, DMANDAMARTINI. I have my full schedule if you are in the DC area to see me performing live. It sounds, I honestly, while I was getting ready for this, setting up a new venue for hopefully another monthly show in DC. I appear fairly regularly with a lot of my friends throughout the DC area, and yeah, please come find me on social media. I would, if you want to hear me ranting about lots of nerdy things, I appear regularly on other nerdy podcasts ranting about X-Men stuff in particular.
You know, folks, I also recommend that you a friend or whatever you do on Twitter. I follow Demand on Twitter, and it's a fun. I mean, it's fun stuff. You're going to see fun stuff. Demand, thank you so much for coming again.
Thanks guys so much. I'm sorry that I rant. I do, and usually I take us over time, but I have a lot of opinions.
Yeah, this is why we want you here, because you're dynamic and we love you.
And as any classy flight attendant in first class would tell you, it's all part of the service.
Yes. So also, before we go, I want to say I wore these earrings specifically tonight. They say little things that say Blair on them, and it says, "They're coming to get you, Barbara." I got them from Reb's Rainbow House on Instagram. They have a little Etsy shop that make super cute, fun little acrylic earrings. They're all hand cut, handmade. They are a wonderful little artist. I have a bunch of their earrings, but I love. I'm like, I finally a reason to wear my "They're coming to get you, Barbara."
Wonderful. Well, thanks again, Demanda, and I also want to thank our chat room, who's been here as we've been streaming live. Before I tell who was in there, DJ, tell everybody about how they can join us live when we do this every first and third Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time.
Certainly. So Matinee Minutia is live twice a month, as you heard Toppy just tell you. And if you go to matineeminutia.com, you can click on the little blue mask symbol. It also looks kind of like a gaming controller. It's called Discord. It's what the cool kids use nowadays to chat with each other while they're playing games. And a few podcasts use it for their chat rooms too. We're also on YouTube. So as Demanda herself would say, if you'd like to see all of this nonsense, you can go on over to YouTube and look for Matinee Minutia. There's also a link on our homepage at matineeminutia.com. Just look for the familiar YouTube logo.
Excellent, DJ. Thank you. And joining us tonight in the chat room, thanks to Discord, we are proud and happy to have had here Janet from another planet, Maren Gertz, Tommy Hash Browns, Spanking B. Arthur. He's that podcaster that does Chubb's Gone Wild and his other little shoe. Does he want me to? Anyway. We also do Archie Cruiser. And thanks. And Rosa Sharon was here as well. Did I get everybody? I think so.
I do believe so.
Thanks so much for being here and supporting Matinee Minutia. It wouldn't be the same without you.
Oh, that means it's time to catch the bus home.
Yikes, feet, don't fail me now.
In the ways of the old radio days, Toppy, will you say goodnight, Gracie?
Good night, Gracie.
Thank you for listening to Matinee Minutia.
Our show streams live on the first and third Friday of the month.
Go to univazpods.net, click the tower for streaming audio. Enter Discord for our chat room.
You can find our show anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Find us on Twitter at Matinee Minutia.
Find our group on Facebook.
Or visit our webpage at matineeminutia.com.
Have an idea for a show? Or why not let us know how we're doing?
Email us at matineeminutia@gmail.com.
This has been an Ollybug production.
I have a voice.
I have a voice.
You have a voice.
You have a voice.
We have a voice.
We have a voice.
Unique voices in podcasting.
univazpods.net. Happy Halloween! Okay, so I'm going to take us off the stream.